As a life science leader, your job is to make high-stakes decisions. Scientific Accessions brings you candid conversations with executives, innovators, and healthcare disruptors who've navigated launches in some of the most complex therapeutic areas. If you're building something ambitious and you want to hear how others at the top are navigating uncertainty, competition, and growth, this podcast is your competitive edge. So press play. Let's get to work.
Welcome to Scientific Accessions. In this episode, we turn our attention to Massachusetts, a global epicenter of biotechnology, medtech, and advanced therapeutics. At the center of this ecosystem is the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center, a pioneering public-private engine that has helped shape one of the most intentional, well-capitalized, and resilient life sciences strategies in the world. I am excited to have 5 of the core members of this ecosystem here with me today. Why don't I have you introduce yourselves?
Hello, my name is Samantha Johnson. I am the founder and CEO of Tatum Robotics. We are based in Watertown, Massachusetts at the Perkins School for the Blind, and we've developed the first independent communication tool for the deaf-blind community, allowing them to communicate in their primary conversational language without having somebody with them to communicate.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Asmi Chakraborty. I'm the Director of Scientific Innovation and Strategic Investments at Massachusetts Life Sciences Center. We're essentially a quasi-public organization that disperses and funds various scientific projects and also ecosystem build and business development.
I'm Ryan Madauer. I'm the Executive Vice President of Educational Partnerships and Workforce Investments at the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center. I've been with the organization for over 18 years now, so very excited to have this conversation. And welcome to Massachusetts, and thank you so much for having us.
And I'm Tiffany Walther. I'm a program manager at the Massachusetts Life Science Center, and I manage 2 programs, one centered around underrepresented entrepreneurs called Mass Next Gen, and then another more focused on nonprofit hospitals and academic centers for our Women's Health Initiative.
And my name is Min Min Yan, or Mimi. I am the CEO and co-founder of Phage Pro, which is an infectious diseases biotech startup based in Mansfield, Massachusetts, that is reimagining how bacterial diseases are prevented. And we're working on cholera prevention right now. It's an honor to be here with you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am so excited to have this conversation because I'm going from city to city, ecosystem to ecosystem to learn more about what it takes for ecosystems to work. What are the major necessary pieces that make that ecosystem functional, that make it successful, and make the companies that come out of those ecosystems successful. And Massachusetts has been bolstered by Massachusetts Life Sciences Center. And here, you have served as a launching pad for a number of phenomenal companies. Tiffany, can you describe how MLSC has done that work?
Yes, MLSC has been really this behind-the-scenes actor, I feel, in really bolstering the life sciences, as you mentioned. So the MLSC is a quasi-state agency, meaning that we're able to deploy investment funds for the life sciences on behalf of the governor's administrative directives, and then also our own like program design and things like that. And so we're able to touch not only what people normally think about life sciences, so work that goes on in a lab with a scientist with a white coat. We also get to support early stage entrepreneurs, later stage companies through business development initiatives, and then also younger individuals within the state in workforce and education, all the way through the pipeline. So we want individuals to get interested in the life sciences as children and then go through college, hopefully staying here, and then maybe even making their own businesses and then growing in Massachusetts.
Thank you for that. That is phenomenal to hear. Massachusetts has been is an older ecosystem, is a more established ecosystem. So it makes sense that you have to stretch further and further down the talent pipeline, the education pipeline, in order to drag the talent kind of into the current place in the current state, right? With that, there's a lot of need for diversity across all parts of the pipeline and all parts of the talent pool. How does MLSC help with that?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have this whole pipeline starting from young individuals all the way through college into entrepreneurship and bigger companies. I'd love to turn it over to Ryan to talk about that beginning part of the pipeline, and then would love to talk about that later stage part too.
Thank you, Tiffany. So I'm really glad you asked this question because diversity in our life sciences workforce has always been something that we've cared very deeply about at the Mass Life Sciences Center. We've never been shy to state that the life sciences workforce here in Massachusetts is not very diverse relative to other industries and relative to other states. And it's something that since we were created, we recognized immediately that we needed to address. And so we've been very intentional about how we design our programs and the types of initiatives that we support to really increase diversity, equity, inclusion, and access to the life sciences so that our workforce looks more like our population. So we've been at the forefront of several initiatives aimed at raising awareness about life sciences career opportunities, providing access for underrepresented students. And as Tiffany mentioned, once students graduate, they want to start companies, there's still barriers. And so through our Mass Next Gen initiative, we've been able to address that as well. So feel free to take it over.
I'll chime in for Mass Next Gen. It's a really amazing handoff for individuals who are coming from, let's say, at the lab bench. They had these amazing ideas during their PhDs or times in the lab, but they need that bridge in order to break into this innovative life science system that we have. And what does a company look like outside of the lab? And so Mass Next Gen allows for underrepresented entrepreneurs to really have that developmental time to understand business strategy and understand their executive leadership and really meld those two together in order to go out and raise more and more capital on their own. Mass Next Gen started in 2018 with the initiative of really going after women, underrepresented entrepreneurs, because they were an individual group that weren't getting as much funding compared to their male counterparts. And that wasn't based on the amazing innovations that they had. It was based on them being not men. And so noticing that both in the raising capital and being able to move within this life science system, Mass Next Gen was created. And it allows for up to $100K in non-dilutive funding for entrepreneurs to help their milestones and hire on people and grow. But then it has the developmental aspect, like I mentioned, of business strategy and executive coaching. And hopefully they leave us and go off and raise even more capital. But we're always calling them back for things like this to speak about the life science ecosystem. But then also different conferences that we also sponsor to really put them in the forefront of this ecosystem. So after we had that beginning part of Mass Next Gen 1.0, we now have a 2.0 version that started a few years ago, where we opened our aperture a bit in what diversity means for this program. So it's not just women anymore, it's immigrants, veterans, and all sorts of other underrepresented individuals who also have those same struggles of raising capital just because of their background and maybe how they present as well. So we have one male so far, and we'll have more along the way, but they all mesh really well, and they're all after the same efforts of wanting to grow themselves and their company.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal program. Thank you for sharing that. And I think we may have two in the room who have taken advantage of that program. Samantha and Mimi both were products of the program, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. What I like about what has happened here is that there was growth, first off, and development. And obviously, Boston is known and Kendall Square is known that ideas, you walk out on the sidewalk and you trip over a startup, right? and you stumble over an idea, right? All at the same time, right? And that is so much different than where I am in Research Triangle Park, where you stumble over a CRO or a CDMO, or different than San Francisco, where you kind of don't stumble over them. You have to know where to go or where to be to see them. Each ecosystem is very different. What I appreciate about what's happened here is that you guys have been deliberate about recognizing the needs of the startups and recognizing the need for those who are starting these companies and helping to support them in that way. I really appreciate that. So there are really four major parts that I see in a hub, and you guys have touched on one. One is kind of just the broad anatomy, right? What's here, what allows things to grow and foster. There's capital and commercialization, which, Tiffany, you mentioned briefly when talking about non-dilutive funding. So those of you who don't understand what non-dilutive funding is, that is funding that does not hit a cap table, which is very important for an early stage company. If you need a lesson on a cap table, send me a message. There's also infrastructure in place, like what's around where you are, things like MLSC, things like Mass Next Gen, and these other programs that really help support companies growing and developing. And then there's talent, partnerships, and community, which also falls a little bit into what MLSC does. So in building out, and none of this is done 100% intentionally. Some of it just kind of falls into place. And in every city I've been in, they all say, well, we thought we wanted to be this, and then this is what happened, and this is where we are. I'd love to maybe start with that first part, with that anatomy piece, and maybe ask a question around how Massachusetts has moved beyond that organic growth to be more prescriptive about what you're focusing on here. Ryan, maybe let's go to you.
Yeah, so two decades ago when the Mass Life Sciences Center was created, and with the launch of the Life Sciences Initiative, which has since been reauthorized twice, so we're now in our third iteration, in total $2.6 billion of funding committed by the state, taxpayer dollars, to invest in our ecosystem. We can't do it without the funding, right? But it's not just about the funding. It's about this unique partnership that we have here in Massachusetts between industry, academia, and government. And I don't think any other state in America has that type of partnership the way that we have it here. They've tried to replicate it in other states, but it truly is part of our secret sauce, right? It's what makes everything work here. I feel like we've truly cracked the code on how to build a strong ecosystem, and it's because of that partnership coupled with the public investment, right? So supporting the infrastructure, and this is all throughout Massachusetts, not just in Boston, Cambridge, which is kind of the heart of the life sciences hub, but it's important to us that we're supporting individuals all throughout the state. And you're seeing, since the Mass Life Sciences Center, was created, since the launch of the initiative, we've had Worcester, for example, which is the state's second largest city, right in central Massachusetts, emerge as the top 15 life sciences hub in the cluster in the country. And that didn't happen by accident, right? It happened because we've been making very strategic investments, consistently supporting our partners all throughout the Commonwealth. Lowell, the Berkshires, all these other areas. We're sitting here today in Kendall Square, celebrating entrepreneurs that were, just received, another round of, we made another round of grants for the Mass Next Gen program, and we're here with founders who are located outside of Boston and Cambridge, and there's a reason for that. It's because we've built and supported and nurtured thriving clusters for our entrepreneur community, for our industry, all throughout the state. So you don't have to be in Cambridge or Boston in order to be successful. There's opportunity all throughout the Commonwealth. And I think that's something that's been really important to us that didn't exist 20 years ago.
Oh, I agree that the great thing about Boston as a hub and its age, not in a negative way, makes it able to expand, to take the good parts of what they've learned along the way and then share them across Massachusetts. And that's what it sounds like has happened here. The great thing about Boston is that they've grown up and evolved. And because they've done that, they can now share their knowledge with the rest of Massachusetts. Worcester, the Berkshires, both of them are products of the success of Boston here, right? But why is that critical to life sciences success here in Massachusetts? There's a lot here in Boston. Why do you need to spread out and go beyond 95?
So, great question. As the Commonwealth, it's very important to us that our residents all throughout the state have access to these opportunities that we're creating. So we've now created over 18,000 jobs since the Life Sciences Center was established. And many of those jobs are located outside of Boston and Cambridge. We want residents of this Commonwealth to feel like this is an industry that they can participate in. And it's important to us that we're making investments in communities that want to grow their life sciences footprint. And so that's been very intentional. We have a number of programs that focus on making investments in what are called our gateway cities. We have 26 gateway cities. These are mostly urban communities with large low-income populations, and they need economic growth as well. It's really important that we're tapping into the potential, the talent that's out there that can't always commute to Boston, Cambridge. And let's be honest, if you're a startup, and we have a couple sitting at the table today that can attest to this, it's not cheap to find lab space in Cambridge or Boston, right? And so there's definitely incentive for the entrepreneurs to look outside of Boston, Cambridge for those for opportunities to establish their companies.
If you look at also life sciences in general, including the entire Commonwealth, the geographic diversity that comes into it as people are doing research or people are coming with different perspectives from different areas is extremely critical to not just have a very insulated bubble of people who are only in Boston, Cambridge and thinking of ideas in an isolated system. So as you bring in entrepreneurs, you bring in other people, you get a varied perspective, which leads to better progress, faster progress. The other side of it, in some of our programs, we want to make sure we're inclusive of also, ultimately in life sciences, a huge part of it is being patient-facing. So if you don't build out ecosystems in other areas, then you're not going to get information from what they need, what kind of research needs to be done. And so it is critical to, yes, put in money and develop those areas as well, but also to make sure that people there feel like they want to be included in these studies to actually make life sciences accessible, not only to be in life sciences as a career, but that the products coming out of it is actually towards them. So we have a couple of programs, our research infrastructure, the biobank program, Women's Health Initiative, focused at making sure that we take perspectives from multiple areas. It's an extremely niche field, life sciences in general, focused at, helping people, helping patients. So that is also maybe a little ancillary to the exact question, but why it's necessary to include the entire state.
So when we sit here talking about diversity, and we talk about diversity in the workforce, diversity in the patient population, and ultimately it's about making sure, as Asmi said, that the drugs, the products, the devices that we're making actually will help the communities, right? If we're always making it in one very insulated bubble, we only enroll a certain type of person in a clinical trial, you're only going to help one part of your population. And in order for a Commonwealth or in order for a community to thrive, you have to be thinking about everyone in it so that it's like a rising tide lifts all boats, right? And biotech in this state is one of those things. It's a huge driver of economy, not only for people who are sitting outside of Boston, Cambridge, but as well as a lot of the communities within Boston and Cambridge as well who didn't feel like they could be a part of that part of the system. So I think it's important, as MLSC has thought about, not only including all these different gateway cities throughout the Commonwealth, but also very intentionally reaching into communities within Boston and Cambridge as well who have often been overlooked.
Thank you. And for both of you, your companies are both located outside of the Boston, Cambridge, One Kendall Square trip over an idea bubble. Tell me a little bit more about how you expanded or how you made the intentional decision, I would have to say, to not be here. You want to start?
Yeah, I can start. So we're based right outside of the city in Watertown, which allows us to really benefit, I think, from all of the infrastructure within the city, but also the rest of the state. And we are working with the population, the deafblind population, that accessibility is so important in terms of actually being able for us to get to them, for them to get to us. We spend a lot of time traveling across Massachusetts to target our population. And by being situated outside of the city, it's easier for almost everyone to get around, but also allows us to benefit from the talent across Massachusetts as well. One of the great things MLSC does through their workforce training programs and education is they're supporting life sciences education from such a young age that we're benefiting from high school students through internship challenges and college students from within Boston universities, but also across Massachusetts. They're able to get to us easier because we're a little bit outside of the city in that way. And of course, as you mentioned, rent in the city is not always sustainable for, really small companies. Starting a life sciences company
or parking.
Or parking.
Or traffic.
There are deterrents for getting people into the city without
or just living.
Right. You have to have a company situated in the city. If you're expecting people to be able to live and have quality of life within the city, the barrier as an employer is so much higher. And situating right outside the city allows us to get more talent in and allows us to grow at a faster rate by supporting the infrastructure that Massachusetts MLSC has provided.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm loving what I'm hearing about what we thought was the Boston ecosystem, which is actually broader than just the Boston ecosystem. It's the Commonwealth ecosystem is what I'm hearing. I don't know if anyone outside of the Commonwealth knows that, right? They probably feel like it's all just straight out of Boston and into the world. But I'm loving that both the companies here are looking outside of Boston proper to build, and that the supportive organizations are also looking outside of Boston to help support building of companies. So we've talked about the basic infrastructure and the anatomy of the hub here in the Commonwealth, which is much broader than the singular city of Boston that most people think it is. It's across the state, east to west. Now, capital tends to also be regional, right? So how does the MLSC organization use capital to unlock this innovation across the Commonwealth?
I think that when we think about public-private partnerships, it enables technologies that are not normally seen as compelling and attractive investments to thrive. So one way that, even though it only sounds like $100K, it doesn't sound like a $20 million round, right? We were so excited to get our first MLSC non-dilutive funding because in a very fragile state where technology is coming out of universities, it's at its early stages of beginning to see if it could become a company, you need to protect that as much as possible. And $100K actually allowed me to hire my first employee. And it brought someone from North Carolina up to Massachusetts. I know. I'm so sorry. For the state, it was a great metric. Put that in my MLSC report. But when we think about unlocking innovation, that fragile state at the beginning needs so much intentional cultivation. Yeah. And that capital, that $100K, allows me to hire the employee, yes, but it also allows me to then offload so much of the science and onto another full-time person, and then I can start to step into my role as the CEO and start that engine going of innovation for our company, and I get to pour more time into my community, and I get to pour more time into other peers who are also starting companies. So it might seem like a small investment of capital at the beginning, but what it unlocks across the Commonwealth is not only for the company, it's for the innovators, it's for the innovator community, and it's even for universities who are hoping that their innovation will get to spin out of the academic setting.
Awesome.
Yeah, like with you talking about the public-private partnerships, I think like that angle of initially I was only thinking of infrastructure in this place, but we do support, like one of the awardees today spoke about Jean, that she had the award where she got $750K and she had to get a private partnership. And I think that kind of partnership enables faster collaboration, faster commercialization, and you can be from any of the universities across the Commonwealth and take part in that. And one of the reasons that was established was to serve two things. A, with employment, because they're required to hire a postdoc who works in the company as well as the university, or either or, depending on how they want to do it. And also that they get input from larger companies or companies that are actually commercializing products to know how they can reach that faster. Two other ways in which we help the entire Commonwealth and try to not completely concentrate in any one particular hub is through the databases that we keep from all the equipment that we purchase through MLSC. So we have the RED database, which is essentially for all the equipment that has been purchased. So any entrepreneur all across the Commonwealth can go look up an equipment and use it for their research. So, for example, we have one of the 4 best NMR in the core facilities, and this, for someone to build from scratch, would be very difficult for an early stage company, but anybody can go and utilize it, even a researcher in another university. So you're not restricted anymore by which university you're in or your area, but you can actually go and utilize this in multiple different places. We do similar things with data generated by MLSC funds is stored in a database. Anyone can access it so that they don't have to repeat and do that again. So in a way, making resources that can be utilized by multiple people available brings down the threshold that certain companies have to cross to get data to become attractive to more traditional funding like VC.
Yeah, that's great that you become kind of this core facility, to use academic terms, that's a shared resource for multiple groups so that they can generate that early data and then become a commercialized, potentially, company.
Yeah.
Now, non-dilutive funding is typically the beginning, right? A lot of innovation starts off with NIH grants or some other government agency grants, some private advocacy group grants. A lot of innovation starts there. The next step, once you've gotten to proof of principle or through proof of principle, which is typically where that non-dilutive funding stands, there's a transition into, quote, venture, right? And I'm going to make that a very broad term for this conversation. That could be angel, that can be private equity, that could be VC, any of those. We'll just call that all venture. How does the ecosystem here help these companies transition from getting non-dilutive funding, which has one set of milestones, to getting cap table funding that has a different set of milestones? Maybe.
Yeah, I can take this. Yeah, I think what MLSC in Massachusetts does is really recognize companies at such an early stage that venture broadly doesn't maybe yet appreciate. And when I first started my company, and like many founders in life sciences are not necessarily entrepreneurs or business majors through college. They're often scientists or, technical founders generally. And I was speaking with angels and other venture companies, and they didn't really see what we were building. We didn't have prototypes that were functional yet. We didn't have the data, the usage, clinical data to show that it was working. We didn't have any of this yet. And what we were able to do is get this non-dilutive funding through MLSC, through Mass Next Gen, and we were able to get support through their internship programs to really start building this product. It's at this stage that we're able to delay that venture input as well to allow us to also really cement our mission. I think something that Mimi talked about as well is life science is so mission-driven. We're not building something broad and throwing darts. Like, we have a mission and a goal to help support the health and well-being of people. And by allowing us to really develop that strongly with non-dilutive capital, and then to the point that now we have these functional equipment, we have data, we have maybe clinical data. Now if we can go for venture funding later, it's so much more attractive. I'm able to get into doors that would have never opened for me years ago. And now people are coming to me instead because we're able to reach these milestones through the non-dilutive route.
You want to say something, Mimi?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's really de-risking, right? Mm-hmm. Because as I said before, it's such a fragile state when you first start. There's so much risk that a traditional VC might not want to take on. And that's where the non-dilutive funding, whether it comes from states or federal funding, they play such a huge role in making sure that that innovation doesn't get snuffed out right at its beginning. Yeah. It gets de-risked through these very strategic but intentional non-dilutive funding mechanisms to get to a point where a VC is like, okay, well, it's de-risked enough. I've seen enough of this traction here, here, and here. Now we're willing to make a big bet on it.
Yeah, thank you.
And if I could just add something small, what's really wonderful about Mass Next Gen specifically is it's not just funding. Often the programs also come with this support and this educational element as well. As I mentioned, everyone in most people in my cohort, they were technical founders. Mm-hmm. So allowing us to build the skills needed to become CEOs mm-hmm. as well, so that when we are in these rooms finally, or we're having these conversations, we understand how to approach that, what was needed from us. Because there's so much going on in a life sciences company. There's so many different avenues that the investments, these non-dilutive investments that we're getting, I viewed them as investment because it's not just this capital. They're investing in us as people, as founders, as CEOs to build and continue growing.
Yeah. And to your point, they protect you from all the noise
yes.
for a little while longer,
right?
While you figure out who you are.
Right.
I have 11-year-old boys, and my job every day is just to insulate them just one more year until I let them go, right? And that's what non-dilutive funding does, is it just insulates you just a little while longer so that you can get sharper, get tighter, and be ready.
100%.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
Just to add, anyone, whoever is listening, and if they're looking at non-dilutive funding, a lot of the times, like you mentioned, people think of it as, you're just coming out of the lab and it's only for that initial stage. But as even early stage VCs become more and more risk averse, mm-hmm. non-dilutive funding can be seen in a broader sense too. And we always encourage people to look for that and not only think that if you don't get a VC investment, then that's it, you need to close shop at all, right. Especially in this climate right now. I think early on, when the bubble was there, it was easier to get early VC money, but early VC is also pretty late for any technology coming out of the lab with bench success. So just a small note on that.
Yes, 100% agree. The funding climate now has changed, actually, in a year. Last year, this time, it was pretty dismal by most accounts. Maybe to 2008 levels, dismal is what the numbers say. Now we're out of that, but not quite back to where we were at the bubble stage. But I think that's an opportune time for companies that are younger and earlier to really lean on non-dilutive funding, to really tighten their message, tighten their product offering, tighten their operations until they're prepared for the capital. I think that's what I've seen with a number of companies. They kind of just close the doors, hadn't talked to anybody, then they pop out a year later and they're they're a completely different group because they've taken the time to do that. So let's talk about post-funding and now into what I like to call the valley of death, right? So you've now got, let's say you've got a product. You've gotten some early funding from either non-dilutive or dilutive sources. You've got a product. You've gotten regulatory clearance or approval. So now you've made it to the starting line, right? How have you seen ecosystems help companies get out of what we call that valley of death? So from having a product that's approved and ready to go to being a viable business where you're making revenue, positive revenue.
We're a devices company, so obviously very different from biologics, therapeutics.
Yep.
The barrier to entry obviously is a bit different. But we're at this stage now that we are revenue generating, and it is almost like you have a different business. Mm-hmm. It's completely different. The team that you need is different. Mm-hmm. The pace you work at needs to be different. The problems you have are different. And it's an exciting time, but as you mentioned, I completely understand how this is where a company could fall into these gaps. And I think, as mentioned, these previous programs have equipped us with mentors as well. And I think it has really helped shape who I'm talking to try to understand what comes next. And as you mentioned, regulatory requirements, those are always changing. Reimbursement pathways are opening and closing, and how we approach that shifts. And I think Massachusetts does a great job of giving us the information that they know as well. I think what's really unique about being in Massachusetts is we get to talk to the lieutenant governor. We get to talk to the secretary of economic development. We can talk to the mayor. We have these resources who are fully championing what we're doing and understand what we're working towards to help us really thrive in a place that can really be a place that is really a hard stop.
Yeah. Mimi?
Well, we're not revenue generating.
That's okay.
We are a biologics company, so we do
it's a little bit different.
A very long path. I see the valley of death as the preclinical to clinical transition and trying to get the funding to get someone to believe in you enough in order to fund your first clinical trial for safety and maybe even clinical efficacy. Yeah. I would agree with Samantha that what the Massachusetts ecosystem has done with programs is given you a community. Yeah. And as someone who is daughter of immigrants, I'm a woman, first-time founder, young, I had a lot of support networks from growing up, but I didn't have a network of folks who have done it before. Yeah. And Massachusetts, MLSC at its helm, but also Mass Ventures, Tamir Institute, Lab Central, they're all so densely located in the Commonwealth. And they provide so many opportunities and so many ways for you to meet mentors. Once you've established yourself a little bit with hopefully some recognition from the Mass Next Gen Fellowship, you get your name out there, you get to start to enter some of these rooms with mentors who are so willing to talk to you. And I think that's very rare where you have so many mentors that are waiting to just talk to you and figure out what you're doing. And that is what's going to help you navigate any gaps that you have, any funding gaps, any commercialization strategy gaps, policy changes. There are people here all around that have navigated it before, may not have navigated the exact situation, but have a mindset and a skill set that they can teach you and are so willing to share with you so that you can get across however you can.
Yeah. Awesome. That is one thing that I think is different about the Commonwealth as an ecosystem is density at the end of the day. Just density becomes a powerful tool. When you're in North Carolina, where I am, where you've stolen employees from.
She went back. Does that help?
A little bit. It helps.
We could cut that, so sorry.
He may not cut it. He may not cut it. He likes these things. But I forgot what I was going to say. It's so funny. Density, correct. So, yes, in North Carolina, if you want to get a clinical research project done, you come to North Carolina to do it because we have the density of companies that have done that 1,000 times before with 1,000 different products. Here, the density, which is why capital is regional, the density of the number of people who have walked the path you're attempting to walk and are willing to help you through that and mentor you through that is much greater here than it is where I am from and in some other areas in the country that are trying to build these ecosystems as well. So I 100% agree that density is really important, especially when there's a group of people who are looking to hold out their hand to help pull you up the ladder instead of watching you flounder.
Yeah, and if I can just add, because I think being in Massachusetts, there's so many experts that surround life sciences as well. Like life sciences is not exclusively wet lab science. You know, in Massachusetts, there's robotics, there's AI, there's this growing ecosystem that surrounds life sciences as well. Yeah. I think something MLSC does is really recognize how all of those play together within life sciences. And I think will just help to ensure that life sciences continues to excel and grow here because they're understanding how, you know, what is life sciences in 2026 and what does that look like in 2030 and how does that continue to grow?
Yeah, just wanted to add, like, resonating with both Mimi's and Samantha's points of when we build some of the programs, right, like one example is Mass Next Gen, the other one we have a Neuroscience Consortium, is in biologics especially, it's difficult to reach that stage of profit. It takes a very long time. So input from, larger companies that have done this, people over there, the expertise. So Mass Next Gen, both of you spoke about the training process of it, like how you can meet with a lot of these people and talk about how they did that, how it's set up. The other piece of Neuroscience Consortia, what we do is even earlier stage in this consortium, completely funded externally, companies put in dollars to get access to early stage research that is still in the lab. And so scientists can get feedback at that stage of, is this going to be commercially viable or is this not? So those kind of interactions early on, especially for biologics, for cell gene therapy, is really critical, because if they fail at clinical stage, that's a lot of money involved, and often for an early entrepreneur might be extremely devastating. So we definitely encourage early conversations with the players where you might be acquired or you might not be acquired, but you still might partner. So you talk early on so that you know you're going the right path is something we think about in that stages too.
Thank you. Thank you all. So when we deploy capital, we talked about how non-dilutive funding has a different set of metrics than dilutive funding, and that those who give non-dilutive funding have a different set of expectations and outcomes than those who are giving the dilutive funding. How do you guys measure success, in air quotes, based on non-dilutive funding that you've received or given, or dilutive funding you've received or given?
We talk about ecosystem-wide when we give out dilutive funding, non-dilutive funding throughout. Our ROIs are very different from whether it's generating profit or not. It's whether the ecosystem is thriving. But I think there's short-term and long-term. Some of the programs that come to mind over there is in research infrastructure. Sure, long-term is to make sure it's cheaper, easier for people to access equipment. But short-term, it generates business with the nonprofits getting the dollars from us, the nonprofits purchasing the equipment from companies, so it creates economic development in that space short term.
Okay.
But long term, we are hoping that it will actually make it easier for early stage companies to be able to get the data that they need without burning through as much capital, because it's available at nonprofit price. And that's one example. A new program we're starting with the biobank is it's extremely expensive for early stage companies to have contracts with multiple hospitals and then get the samples that they need, and sometimes getting samples from commercial donors is very expensive. So if you have a statewide biobank in place, which is what we're trying to do, is we reduce, again, that threshold immediately. But when it's built out, so that's a little bit long term. But short term, we're hiring multiple vendors. We're hiring people to build that ecosystem out. We're pumping in money into the nonprofits so that they are like the AMC, so that they're ready to give a sample. So like an ecosystem that's probably struggling a little bit because of current funding situation is now able to leverage their expertise and build out something that in short term generates some economic growth, but in long term might be even more beneficial. So I think that's somehow we plan, when we think of designing programs, it's like we take that kind of view with them, is immediately understanding the need of the ecosystem through surveys, et cetera, and then thinking long-term how that would benefit them, but also short-term, is it creating some kind of benefit for companies and other nonprofits?
I think one of the things that makes Mass Life Sciences Center so successful is that we do listen to our stakeholders, and we have so many different types of partners. This was alluded to earlier. It's not just companies, right? There's so many different types of stakeholders out there that play a part in this ecosystem, and we listen to them. We survey participants in our programs. We have conversations. We seek feedback and advice, and all of our programs take that input into consideration. And we've evolved our programming over the years. I mentioned our internship program being 18 years old, but it hasn't always looked this way, right? So we've spun out a high school program. You mentioned earlier that the importance of the MLSC has enabled you to bring in a high school student that you wouldn't have done that otherwise, and training high school students. So we have a whole program just for high school students that even includes a pre-internship internship training program. And then we have our data science internship program. So we spun out a program about 6 years ago that is specifically designed for those advanced analytics roles, the machine learning opportunities in the life sciences, so we can steer individuals with those skills into life sciences, because we heard from our companies that said it's really hard to find data science talent. There's too much competition with other sectors, and this program was really designed to attract that talent to Massachusetts and ensure that we're giving them kind of a little bit of a taste of what it's like to work at a life sciences company using your skills. And do you want to use your skills at Google to build to write algorithms for ads, or do you want to use your skills to help us cure cancer? Right? I think a lot of that resonated with a lot of folks that are now like, ooh, I'm really curious about what jobs are like in the life sciences. And so that's just another example of how we've evolved the program. I mean, even just on the mechanics of it all, it started as a summer internship program, and then companies were like, no, we need interns all year round. So we expanded it. So we're constantly innovating and iterating on these programs to ensure that we're being responsive to the needs of industry.
Thank you. I mean, that covered talent, workforce, kind of in one fell swoop. Please.
I really like how Ryan started off this podcast saying we know what the gaps are and we always say what they are. Because when any organization, whether you're a public organization, a private organization, whatever size, if you don't know what your problems are and you don't state them, you can't solve them. Yeah. And what I think the MLSC has done incredibly is that they always very publicly state what the issues are and how they're going to work to resolve them. Yeah. So one thing that I can say from the diversity standpoint, not only have you seen two different versions of Mass Next Gen recognizing that it was not only a gender gap, but also gaps in all aspects of diversity that they wanted to look at. Just speaking about the internship program, there's also, we haven't mentioned yet, Project On-Ramp that I've gotten interns from. There's all these other areas that MLSC builds into one program to try to hit all of the gaps that they see in terms of not only geographical distribution. I think HBCUs, if you have an HBCU student that is not from Massachusetts, but they are enrolled at HBCU, they are also qualified for the internship challenge. So it's not just one aspect of diversity that they're trying to strengthen. They're trying to strengthen all across, and they only know that because they have the data and they state it and they actively work towards solving it. And I think that's very rare in today's climate.
Agreed.
It's something that keeps our Commonwealth constantly striving to be better, and that's all we really want, right? For our patients, for our communities, we just always want to be better for them. So MLSC at the helm in this Commonwealth has set a great example for that.
Yeah, thank you for that.
If we're on the topic of kind of like evolving with the ecosystem and also diversity and, meeting the needs of areas or segments of people who are not often considered, one of them is the Women's Health Initiative. So we started funding women's health at focused research funding and also commercial partnering back in 2019 because, again, we saw that it was a problem. Even now, VC funding, only 2.3% goes in healthcare to women. And it's not because companies do not exist. It's another level of problem that needs to be solved. But also, women-centric research was not really being conducted at the time at the level that we thought it should happen. And so and was not even happening at discovery level as much. Those labs were not receiving funding. So at the time, there were 3 separate programs targeting different areas, and this came from learning from the stakeholders, like all the universities and other companies, is where are your bottlenecks? And so there was a program for early stage research, then you get a little bit better, and then you're able to partner with a company to see if you can commercialize it, which was really difficult to find companies also at the time to partner. But right now, while we have the partnering piece still, we have evolved to see that a lot of the times when you fund this, it ends at a great publication, perhaps, and then after that, there is no ramp. There's that valley of death, the early valley of death that happens. And so in this new program of Women's Health Initiative is to have different pillars, because any project is not just one pillar, you're not just getting discovery data or just doing AI now or anything else, but you need to have all of these together. And finally, the aim, again, in a lot of these projects is how you're serving the patient, whether it's a medical device or just therapeutic. So to have a clinical adoption arm. And a lot of the times, whenever we think of therapeutics or helping a patient, like it has to be a new drug, but a lot of the times in these spaces, and there's a great study that was done by BMC2 where they investigated maternal death and found out that there were interventions that they could put in place to reduce Black maternal death. And so interventions of that kind, those kind of studies is something we are asking people to do and encouraging it through collaboration through multiple institutions so that there is, if we find something that can be easily adopted, and it's not a drug or anything, but it's an early intervention in some form. We really don't know. We're all a bunch of scientists in our team, not MDs. But there is a way to get there faster than always through a therapeutic path or anything. So this is, again, an evolution of a funding mechanism that existed since 2019, but has changed over time because of the needs of the ecosystem.
Yeah, well, overall, it sounds like Boston is much more than meets the eye, right? That one, it's broader than just one Kendall Square. Two, the reach goes beyond just looking for gaps in science or clinical discovery that are commonplace or maybe even run-of-the-mill, like everyone is doing it. It's not just Me Too, that you guys are here looking to really plug big holes where you see gaps. If there's a gap in clinical work in a specific patient population, you are targeting that patient population independent of what a commercialization pathway would look like. I think these two companies here that are represented by Mimi and Samantha represent those types of companies that MLSC is looking to help support. Hey, this is great. We've talked about the Valley of Death, and we know that we talk about a big Valley of Death, which is where 90% of companies fall off the face of the earth for various reasons, whether it's funding or success, clinical success, or early R&D success or failure. There are lots of kind of missteps that can be taken that can lead you into the Valley of Death. MLSC has made it a specific mission to help protect companies as they're stepping into that valley. Azmi, are there programs that you guys have at MLSC that kind of help with that transition?
So along with the Mass Next Gen, where the goal is to be more inclusive and ensure that certain populations that have been kept out of entrepreneurship is allowed to come in and they're fostered and nurtured in their earliest stages. Post that, we have created another program, which is Impact Catalyst, which gives a larger dollar amount, mainly focused on giving them investment so that they can become even more attractive for the early stage venture capitalists. And another factor in the Impact Catalyst program is focusing, again, on areas that are not attractive to traditional VC. So think of mental health, health equity, similar to what we have in the Frontiers program, but that is for very early stage research in these areas. And so it is kind of us building out this network so that we support entrepreneurs from various areas, but also support topic areas that are in danger of not getting funded as much or getting stuck only in academia, and they're not being taken up and commercialized.
When we talked about density here in the Commonwealth, and part of the density is in resources and in funding. Part of the density is in academic institutions. I believe there are 122 in the Commonwealth. I believe that was the number you quoted. What about entrepreneurs? Sometimes you need just a friend that you can call and say, hey, I got a problem. Can you help me out? Other CEO of other company. Is that something that happens here?
I make those calls all the time. I think because there's such a density of infrastructure and capital, then that draws in all these entrepreneurial folks to the area to start their companies. And when you start a company, it's the cliche is true. It's a very lonely journey at the top, and you don't often have the right people around you who understand exactly the depth of those problems. And you don't want to talk to your employees about it because that'd be crossing boundaries, and it's highly inappropriate. You want to talk to someone who really understands what you're going through. And when you're in Massachusetts, you're surrounded by entrepreneurs of all sorts of life sciences companies, tech companies. Everyone's trying to build something that's going to last. And when you have that organically, that's incredible. But you also have conferences and all these events. Every day there is an event for entrepreneurs to go and meet another entrepreneur. And one conference that MLSC sponsored last year was one for entrepreneurs of color in life sciences. Not only did they support the first inaugural of this financially and strategically, but they also provided a lot of help in helping plan out from their data and all their surveys, what exactly do entrepreneurs of color really need to survive and thrive? So we had a lot of the panels cover a lot of the supports that we need, but also just building that community amongst each other, knowing like, hey, you have the same identity as I do. That just adds additional layers onto this founder journey that sometimes can be hard. I think we're very organic, but also very intentional about that here.
Yeah, and I can just add in a small bit. And I think something that we see that I love in the community that we're building is it really is honest community. You know, this isn't competitive. It isn't sneaky. This is something that people are really forming really genuine relationships. And as Mimi mentioned, is we all are experiencing struggles. We all have questions, and we show up in a room that people really want to support you, and you're building this community that is genuine and really is looking for everyone to thrive and is looking to see how they can support you. And that goes beyond just questions about building a business. You know, you can really form great friendships and just really help you find community through entrepreneurship. Yeah,
you're both correct. Founding something on your own, what feels like you just left the planet and you're the only one doing it. And having a group of people around you that help support you and just know that when you're stressed, they know what you're stressing about is really helpful along the journey. Whether or not they can help you or fix it or just have a glass of wine with you and just say, I understand what you're going through. I think that's super helpful. And that's great that that's here, that really tight community. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining me here on Scientific Sessions. I've learned so much about the Commonwealth that I didn't know before. I thought it was competitive. I thought that it was only Boston. I thought that one Kendall Square was the only place. I thought that it was only therapeutic companies. But I've learned much more about this place. And I have a greater respect for what is being built here through all of the innovative companies and the support systems that are helping them. It's evolving away from one Kendall Square, out from east to west. It's growing in diversity in both the companies that are being supported, in the funds that are being distributed, and in the questions that the companies are looking to ask and answer. The Commonwealth is also looking to find more partners beyond just here in the Commonwealth. Then lastly, there's a great support system through Massachusetts Life Sciences Center and other organizations that help to really bolster the ecosystem. I didn't know this before I came, and I'm glad I hopped on a flight to find out. So I want to thank you all for joining me here on this episode of Scientific Sessions, and thank you to you all for educating me on the Commonwealth and what it has to offer to the life sciences system. Don't forget to subscribe to Scientific Sessions if you want to hear more. There'll be another ecosystem on soon, so stay tuned. Thanks all.
Thank you for listening to Scientific Sessions, unscripted conversations with those shaping the future of biotech. If you found value in today's discussion, be sure to follow and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. We release regular conversations with leaders across biotech, pharma, and medtech, all aimed with helping you stay ahead of industry trends. And if this resonated with you, please consider sharing it with a colleague or your network, because the more voices we can bring to the table, the stronger our community becomes. So until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep shaping the future of life sciences.